that we had initially started, and where we were essentially going was an overview of the agenda. Ingrid had talked a little bit about um, the um, the introduction to the issue, um, and the notion that many family support centers understood you know what they wanted, why they wanted to do it, but it was just the how and the what that really were problematic. Um, yeah, I get a phone call coming in from Massachusetts. Hello. Yeah, we're back on now, Ingrid. So, okay, so I'm just kind of picking up, and there was just a technical glitch. I think we're okay, and I was just going to pick back up on the interview, on the overview. Okay, see if you can get back in. Okay, bye. Okay, that was Ingrid calling, and just wanted to know where we stood. Um, so let me start again with this sort of the critical nature of family engagement and the whole notion of relationships. And these were things that we had talked about in previous opportunities to gather with the family support centers. And but we know that families want certain things from us. They want us to support them so they can participate, they can contribute, they can literally find their place in our communities. And I think they look at the family centers as the bridge, if you will, to community. And I think this is exactly what family centers want to do, not just in Massachusetts, but really family centers from all over the United States, and in fact Canada and Australia and other communities. They want to get families engaged in community. I think the real salient question is how what's the best way? What's the way that would really achieve these kinds of goals that families have articulated to us? And clearly, um, the notion of social capital is a cornerstone piece, helping families build and develop social capital, helping their sons and daughters achieve some social capital, because families know that the hardest question, the hardest issue that they struggle with is what's going to happen to their son or daughter when they're no longer able to provide supports or to be available to them. And uh, and and the answer to that question is the notion that their sons and daughters get a chance to build relationships, become known, and become incorporated into the greater community. Now, social capital refers to the value we get in our relationships, that families get in their relationships with other people, other families, individuals get in their relationships, and everyone on this call has has reaped these values in your relationships. Um, the first is informational value, and that's sort of the lowest hanging fruit, where your relationships, your friendships, tell you something that is valuable to you. They give you advice. They give you some recommendations. We also know that the other value that families and individuals receive is through relationships is emotional value, where they know someone has their back and that they're being supported. And then finally, instrumental value. And this is the actual tangible things that people offered each other. And the theory behind this is reciprocity. I do something for you, you can do something for me. Together we're better. Those kinds of things happen through relationships. Now, one of the key philosophies behind social capital and behind community engagement is this notion of interdependence. Not necessarily independence, but interdependence. Um, Interdependence is really when we parlay, we bring some of our strengths someone else brings some of their strengths. Together, we create a much stronger whole than any one of us individually, right? And and so this idea of interdependence is kind of the philosophy that undergirds relationships and community engagement. And just simply, the more social capital that an individual has, or a family has, the more healthfulness, the more happiness, the more confidence, the more achievement, and even life expectancy or longevity is influenced through relationships and meaningful connections in community. And so, clearly, social capital is vital and is the linchpin to somebody's success in community. But there's even more that social capital brings to individuals and to families. If you look at this list, you'll see some pretty important pro-social behaviors that really make community better. And when people are tolerant of one another, when they're more honest with each other, they're fair. But these things primarily are tied to relationships. And quite simply, you behave this way with people you know than with people you don't know. We know and we've documented a lot of unethical, unfair behaviors to individuals with disabilities over time based on the fact that they were not known, right? Now, when a family support center um, does center-based programs, that is, when they do things right within the structure of their own center, those kinds of things might be nice and they might be safe for families, but they don't really help families necessarily build relationships with other families and with other resources in the greater community, right? So center-based activities are, they can be instructive, but we as family support centers need to recognize the power and potency of social capital and sort of the whole framework of how important relationships are to families, because in the end, social capital is really assists with other important kinds of things that we want for our children and that we want for our own families, right? We'd like to see our children get jobs and keep jobs and be safe in the community and have a stability there and advance and achieve just like anyone else. So all of these kinds of important outcomes are really tied to relationships. And one of the things that the project that Ingrid and her colleagues at DDS put together was, for some family support agencies to come together to say, what can we do about this, right? Because we know that if families aren't really connected in their communities, if individuals with disabilities aren't really connected in their community, the risk is not just loneliness and isolation, but the risk can actually lead to a premature life. That knowing people and connecting with people breeds life. And when individuals don't have these opportunities, when families don't have these opportunities, they're at pretty grave risk. This quote from Robert Putnam corroborated, in his book Bowling Alone, where he looked at how important social capital and community engagement is to life. And so we began when we pulled our groups together, when we pulled our three training sites together, we began to think, well, okay, we want to help families build social capital. We want to help individuals build social capital. Where do you find social capital? And that really got us to think about the various platforms that we build relationships in, right? And these all happen essentially in community. If families are just relegated to center-based programs and services, then that's what they're going to know. But if we can begin to really think about how do we help families in any kinds of settings, clubs, groups, associations, churches, schools, those kinds of things will, in fact, I think, be more um, robust in helping those families, achieve the kinds of things that they want. So, if social capital and relationship building and community engagement is important, how do we help families with this? Okay. And so this idea of community engagement was at the core of our pilot projects that we did, because engagement is where we participate with other people toward a common goal. And engagement really requires being there, of showing up, of being a part of something. And yet there's mounting evidence that families who have children with disabilities engage less. There's studies now that have begun to corroborate this. Let me tell you about this study that we did in Pittsburgh, and the organization that I have been associated with for close to 48 years was one of the training sites, or one of the research sites. But what we began to discover in our research in 2016, 2017, that children with disabilities are less likely to stay connected with others via the internet, and that families with disabilities are more likely to report not receiving enough support. And children with disabilities tend not to see their school friends outside of school. Um, and in some cases, their school friends are other kids with disabilities, not typical kids who attend that school. And it appears that families with disabilities are less likely to get support from other family members. So we're beginning to see this sort of isolation happening to families when they don't engage. And we discovered that there were some reasons why families had difficulty engaging. Economics, families who have children with disabilities do not have as much discretionary dollars as families without children with disabilities. And we know that disability is expensive. We know there's co-pays. We know there's equipment. We know there's things that need to be purchased by families that they don't have resources for. So economics is one reason families told us they don't engage as much. Logistics is another key reason. Families, when they decide to go out somewhere, they have to think about every little, step in the process. I know this personally because in supporting my father through his voyage with Parkinson's, when we would make plans to go out somewhere, we had to second guess everything. Where we were going to park, and was it accessible? Was the bathroom easily available? Dietary issues. And in many regards, because of the logistics, sometimes we just threw our hands up and said, maybe we ought to just stay home. Right? So economics, logistics, and stigma. Families told us that they often don't feel welcomed when they're out engaging with their child who has a disability. If their child has a meltdown, or if there's some other issue that unfolds, the families really felt that other people in the engagement venue just didn't want them there. And when you don't feel welcomed, you just decide not to go. So these three things are clearly impediments to family engagement. And then the real question is why. And families feel that sometimes social reactions may be negative. They don't feel welcome. They don't have disposable dollars. Energy and time for logistics is they're tired. So lots of reasons. And the net result, however, is that we've lost the focus of getting families engaged, and have then begun to create more center-based options for them. Yet this is not what we want to see happen, right? This our vision is to get families connected. So to this end, we need to renew our commitment to engagement, and families need to be supported as they connect. And support needs to be both formal and informal, and we must assist families in developing more social capital. So these are the kinds of goals that we have. And we talked with our pilot groups about some of the steps to building relationships, using affinities, mapping community, identifying potential resource venues, understanding the infrastructure of community, how people behave when they go to an engagement site, and then identifying gatekeepers and finding someone in that community who will, in fact, support that family and welcome that family and literally bring their value to that family. So the magic of social capital is when similarities really override differences and create these bridges. Now, our projects, started with this kind of content, and had some success. They had some struggles. We're going to hear their, their perspective on this as we go, because connection with another person or another family takes you deeper into your own soul, and through other people, we actually begin to discover ourselves a little bit more. And this deeper fulfillment actually fuels a better life. It enlivens us. And so this challenge is, how do we help families connect? Albert Schweitzer, wonderful quote: "What we do with our lives individually is not what determines whether we are a success. What determines our success is how we affect the lives of others. What we do to promote another's connection or another's input into the greater community." And so I'm going to stop sharing this screen, and we're going to get into the introduction of our sites that Ingrid had talked about in the introduction. Right, she put the RFP out. We had a number of groups interested. Ultimately, 3 groups were chosen, and there again was no financial resources available, just the opportunity of support from one another, the opportunity to talk more. I had a chance to work with each of the 3 sites a little bit more closely to think about community engagement, and so we're here with this gathering to sort of hear what the sites found and what they did. So Ingrid, I'm going to pitch it back to you, and maybe we can do a quick introduction of the sites and have them weigh in a bit, and then we can do a quick break and then get into our dialogue.
That sounds great. So yes, I'd like to to introduce the 3 the 3 teams, and this really was a team effort. So our first group will be presenting kind of an overview of their project and their learning is Multicultural Community Services. They have 2 family support centers in Western Mass, but this effort was primarily led by their Holyoke Family Support Center in partnership with the Holyoke Chicopee Area Office of DBS. We also had participation from Pathlight and Family Empowerment, which is a family support center in the Franklin, Hampshire area of DBS. And then we had the Berkshire team that was led up by Berkshire County ARC. And we also, our Regional Autism Support Center joined that group for their Berkshire arm, and the Berkshire Area Office of DBS. So one of the things I want you to keep an ear out for is that each of these teams kind of approach their work from a different starting point. MCS really, started with some community partners already kind of recruited and in place. Pathlight and Family Empowerment did some outreach to families to get their involvement in this. And Berkshire Arc had some people already in mind who were kind of in life transition, and that was their starting point. So this was a pilot with a lot of support, but also a lot of ability for people to, each team to kind of find their own way and designate their own approach. So I think that will come through. So would people, Karen from MCS and anyone else from the Holyoke Chicopee team, why don't you, tell us about your project and some of the key things that you learned and what the experience was like and what we can learn from you so that we can maybe replicate.
Great, thank you. So I just want to say, I know that Jason, Maritza, and Nikki are muted, but I want to welcome them to unmute themselves and correct me or add things if I forget anything. We're just going to do a quick overview. I'm Karen Fletcher. I'm the Director of Family Support at the MCS Holyoke Family Support Center. MCS is a large agency in Western Massachusetts. About 50% of our services are family support services. The Family Support Center that we're working with is that participated in this program is the Holyoke Family Support Center. We worked closely with the Holyoke DDS office, who is in full support of this project, and we're very grateful for that. And Jason Little, who's the children's coordinator, joined our team. The Holyoke Chicopee area covers 10 cities and towns, but we decided to focus on Holyoke because it's a great city, and we all love it. It's a city with a lot of good resources and but it's small enough to be attainable to do some kind of community mapping. The population of Holyoke is about 40,000 people, and 54% of the people in Holyoke are Latino. 29% of the people who live in Holyoke live below the poverty line. So we wanted to really see what Holyoke had to offer, as a third of the people that we support through our Family Support Center live in Holyoke. So it made sense to start there. Our goal was to make Holyoke more accessible and inclusive for the people supported through our Family Support Center, either by accessing what already existed or by creating new opportunities. So as Ingrid mentioned earlier, our approach was different from the other teams in that we started with kind of informal community mapping. We had a few community partners already who we reached out to when we learned about this opportunity, and were very willing to participate with us. So it was really nice. Actually, the director from the Holyoke YMCA and the teen librarian from the Holyoke Public Library both came to the two-day training that we had to kick off this project. So it was a real big sign of commitment from those organizations. And also we had a member from the Holyoke Public Schools who was their autism specialist join us for that also, as a commitment to showing the public schools would work with us in this project and support how we might need, whether it be in training community partners or identifying students who might want to participate in this project. So again, like I said, we decided that we were going to find the community partners and then find the individuals by looking at who we support, what kind of programming we have to offer, that it might be what would interest somebody. So after the training, we went to the physical locations. We went to the YMCA. We looked at the physical locations to make sure that they were accessible. The library in Holyoke is beautiful. If anybody hasn't been there, it's really a beautiful place. They have quiet spaces that are available. The staff were really welcoming. They were friendly environments. So we felt really good. And we explored. There were lots of opportunities just at the YMCA and the library. There are game clubs, and we talked about so many great ideas, like an integrated reading group, a crochet club, having students or children that we support be tech support for maybe older people who were members at the YMCA, having older people we support be volunteers at the membership desk or in the childcare room. lots of great ideas, and we were really, really excited. And then we hit roadblocks, and roadblocks they happened a lot in our work here. So, but we were persistent, and what we like to think of things as in a positive way and say that every time we hit a roadblock, we also were able to have an unexpected opportunity. So when the staff at the YMCA, they ran into staffing issues and they weren't able to fully commit to our project, which was really disappointing. But now we know what they have to offer there. It was a learning opportunity for us. So we didn't do any active participation with that group, but I will say that I think our 2-day training was inspirational to the membership director, Davy, if everyone remembers her. She left our training and went on to become a certified autism fitness specialist. And now the Holyoke YMCA hosts that training there. So now Davy trains other trainers. So we weren't able to do a lot through the community building project, but we were able to have Davy open up in a different way to people we support in Holyoke. What we understood, and as Al mentioned before, how important the gatekeeper is. So we had some great gatekeepers, and unfortunately, one of them left her job. So she was not able to help us at the Holyoke Library, which is a phenomenal resource to the people of Holyoke. At the same time, the teen librarian left, so did the children's librarian. So all of the programs just paused. So at that point, we were just frustrated. We're ready to throw in the towel because we came out so excited. There were so many great opportunities. We were frustrated. And then it just happened that we got an invitation from Holyoke Community College. Holyoke Community College is right down the street from us, from our office and our Family Support Center. And they do service learning opportunities for their students. So they invite community partners to a luncheon twice a year and look for opportunities for their students to participate in the community. So at the luncheon, we met the baseball coach at Holyoke Community College, who was such a good guy. Told us afterwards he just went for the free lunch, but that we ended up really enjoying meeting us, and opened up his team to a gentleman that we support who loves baseball, is the same age as the college student. He's in transition. He's probably 21 years old now. So he's the same age as all the baseball players at HCC. And he opened up his team to our gentleman, and he participated for 6 weeks last year before the pandemic hit. He was able to participate in daily practices, 6 days a week, practices and different opportunities with the team. Unfortunately, that's come to a halt because of the pandemic. But that then led to us becoming further connected with people at HCC. Our original connection was through our theater group, which has their annual theater performance there. But then we developed another connection, which was with an English professor and an anthropology professor who were doing a reading circle. And we opened it up to a few people that we support. We supported them through the reading circle. Nikki, who's a member of our team, supported them through 3 classes and then led them off to participate on their own. And they finished the semester in this group. So it was a really nice and unexpected victory, but it was really nice. At the same time, we also were running a yoga class here at our center, which was very nice, but we decided we wanted to open up the opportunity for people to participate in a community-based yoga center. So we supported 3 of the people in a community-based yoga center, and they participated with staff support at first, and she was phasing out as the pandemic hit. So we did have some successes, a lot of roadblocks, but we were very happy with how the project turned out. I don't know if I forgot anything to my teammates today.
Yeah,
I think you're covering everything very nicely, Karen.
Okay.
Okay. And we can get into other questions as we go into our Q&A as it relates to some of the frustrations, Karen, that inevitably you find in community. You know, one of the theoretical points before we move into our second group is that, you know, there's really two paradigms that come into play when you're supporting families. One is a micro paradigm that you kind of doing things with that family. The other is the macro paradigm where the community is unleashed, and in a micro paradigm you oftentimes can control the variables. In a macro approach with community, sometimes you can't control the variables. I mean, things happen around all three of our programs that were unpredictable, that we would have not, we would have never guessed might have gotten in the way. But that's part of community work. It's a little more messy. It's not laboratory oriented. It's in vivo, and so some of those frustrations are going to happen. Let's do this, Ingrid, if we can. Let's move into our second group for an overview, and then into our third group. We'll take a quick little break, and then we're going to come back and actually ask Karen and Jason and Nicole and the whole team some more detailed kinds of questions. Okay, so we'll move into our second group, Ingrid.
Yeah, that sounds great. And I just want to say for the audience, if you have specific questions, Al and I will be posing questions to all the panels after the break. But if you have specific questions that you want to put into the chat as they occur to you, you can do that. And if we have time to get to them, we will. So our next group is I believe Rhonda is going to be the one presenting. So
Indeed.
So this is our team from Pathlight and the Franklin, Hampshire area office.
Yes, so good afternoon, everyone. My name is Rhonda Setkwich, and pardon the loudness behind me. I am one of the people enjoying the outside, like Ingrid mentioned at the beginning of the webinar. So on this beautiful day, I'm presenting from my deck. Thank you all for being here. I just wanted to introduce the rest of my team that's here with me today. I'm going to go in order of the people I see on the screen. Michelle Menz, Donna Kushai, Joanne Lucy, and Megan Carroll. So that's who's here representing the Pathlight and Family Empowerment team today. Again, just like Karen said, if I forget anything, you guys jump in and let me know. I do have a PowerPoint that I'm going to share with some of our findings. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen right now. Let's see if I can do it. There we go. So building community from the Pathlight group. This is us. Now, if I could just advance my slides, will be great. So we started our project with people in mind. So when this all began, we thought, okay, here are some people. There were 3 people, individuals that we thought would be really good candidates to participate in our project. The main goal of the project, of course, was to help these people make connections in their community based on shared interests. So, kind of taking these people who we had initially started with, figuring out what do they like to do? Do they like to sing or play guitar or whatever the case may be? And then our goal initially was to help them find other people in their communities who shared those same interests as them. We wanted to work on the not just being of the community, but in the community and part of the community. It was a great idea, but unfortunately, 2 of our 3 participants actually ended up withdrawing from the project. And then, so we had 1 person left, and we realized that what we really needed to do was regroup and kind of change our focus. What we decided to do was host an event at Family Empowerment and invite people in our, family empowerment Pathlight community, give them a very clear idea of what we were working on, a building community project, and invite people who were interested in participating to come to our event so that we could talk with them about the process and all of that, all those things. Let me see. So we hosted the event, and after the event, we actually had 8 participants and their families who signed up. People were like, yes, we're on, we want to do this. So that right there with lessons learned, when it's a choice and an option, I think you get a little bit more from the person participating. It's different than just calling someone up and saying, hey, you're gonna go roller skating, as opposed to someone who comes to you and says, I want to roller skate. It's that kind of feeling. Through the process of planning and talking with the families that participated specifically in our event, we realized that what was going to be crucial was some other person, be it a caregiver or a family member, who really knew the individual's life, their needs, their schedule, to be of assistance to that person in really getting out into the community. For instance, if there was a young man who was 18 years old, but he lived at home with mom had to be involved to a certain extent in maybe helping arrange his schedule and ensuring that the choices he was making were safe for him, or, things that really he should be doing. So once we had our 8 participants, we did a couple of surveys with them. So we created 2 surveys. One was called, or we used 2 surveys. One was called Feeling Connected, and the other one was called Building Community. And we did casual interviews as well as a survey. And the goal was, instead of picking something like bowling, we're going to make sure everyone can go bowling. What we wanted to do was find people who wanted to participate and then find out what they wanted to do. Find out what they wanted to have in their community. Of course, we did a lot of research around the idea of a gatekeeper. That's one of the big things, that Al has talked a lot about with social capital, and that word sticks with me, I know personally, because it's all about that person who can open that door and make the individual or the family feel comfortable and connected and as if they belong. So it was really a multi-tiered process. We started off with a great idea. It really didn't work. And we were like, holy moly, what do we do? And then we had to just regroup and say, okay, we're still doing this. How can we change it to make it more livable and to make it more realistic? So the project outcomes, I think this might be something that we discuss a little bit more during panel. But what happened was that we did get people who participated in the project and were able to participate in things in their community that they had chosen, things they wanted. Donna and I worked with a young child who, when we met with his mom, one of the things that she talked about was wanting him to be in Boy Scouts and to go on hikes on the trails in the town that they live in. And he has indeed participated in those types of opportunities. She was very clear. She didn't want him to have to go to a special Boy Scout troop that, was only children with differing abilities. She wanted him to be in the Boy Scout troop in the town that he lived in, where people who he went to church with and people who he went to school with were all in the Boy Scout troop. So, meeting with Donna and we tried our best to understand and encourage. And there were, situations like that with all of the other participants as well. Like I said, once we're later together in a panel, we could probably discuss all that a little bit more. But really, I feel like that's about the nutshell of our project.
Great, Rhonda, fantastic overview. And again, we will get back to questions. I think the theme that you're seeing both in Karen and Rhonda's overview of their projects is unpredictability and the need for flexibility because, things can, when you think you're sailing down the road, things can change on a dime. And that's the reality of community. And maybe that's the reason why many organizations have difficulty you know, and they switch back to center-based stuff, is because, you know, you can control that more. So Rhonda, thanks so much for that overview. Ingrid, how about we move to our third group for the introduction, and then we'll get ready. Now, keep in mind any questions that you might have, you could put them into the chat room. Ingrid and I will be monitoring that chat room when we go into our interactive panel. So Ingrid, how about our third group?
All right, so our third group all work together in Berkshire County. So we have the Berkshire County ARC and the Berkshire Area Office of DVS, and also representatives from Autism Connections, which is our regional autism support center that has a chapter in the Berkshires. So if those people would like to unmute yourselves and show us your pretty faces. And I'm going to pass to Sonia. You can introduce your team and then share your screen and presentation.
Hi, everyone. Let me get this set up. So we called our group Community Connections, and we really wanted this pilot project to kind of be a springboard to establish best practice for all of our current programming. We knew there was no funding that came with this, so we really wanted to kind of use this as an opportunity to assess what we were doing and how to make it better. So our team was made up of myself as the person who applied and kind of as like the orchestrator of this group, and Nancy, who is here with us, and she'll be speaking in a little bit. She was another participant from Berkshire County ARC. And we asked Jessica McNair to join us to represent the local DDS office. And it was a really awesome collaboration because Jess and I have worked together in several capacities, but this was a way for us to delve even deeper into that. And then Erica Donovan, who worked for Pathlight, was our community partner. So it was kind of cool because Pathlight was doing this on their own in a different area, but in our like Berkshire County area, that branch was able to be our community partner in this effort. Unfortunately, Erica isn't with us because fortunately she got another position. So we think of her fondly and stuff. And then we also had Marianne Brennan from the ARC of Mass, and it was just a really nice team and a nice group of people, and we were able to really collaborate and share ideas to make what we were able to make happen. So I'll let Jessica explain our goals.
Thanks, Sonia. So our goal for this project was sort of twofold. You know, we really wanted to increase the reach of BARC's family support programs, the current community-based programs that Family Support Center was already offering. And then we also really wanted to increase the capacity of those programs to be really focused on community inclusion and building social capital. So in the end, our main objective, as Sonia sort of alluded to, ended up being that we wanted to be able to take what we were learning through this pilot project and really apply it to programs that were already in existence or that we were working on developing together. The hope was that we would end up with programs that were doing more than just planning activities in the community, but that these activities were actually actively fostering community connections amongst our individuals with community members, and that these activities enabled our participants to actively build social capital.
All right, and Nancy's gonna explain our participants and how we kind of came up with who would be a part of this.
Yes, thank you. So the first thing we did is to create an application. And with this application, we were able to better identify the capabilities of all the participants, what they can do, what they can't do, what their current community connections were already. And so we narrowed it down to some AFC individuals who already graduated from the program. And so they already had this new sense of evolving into their community and wanted to have more. So we took these people and we gave them the opportunity to do this application with us, and we better learned what their capabilities were. And with their permission and the whole, with them and their parents, it was filled out together and in person. And with that, that was the beginning of how we started this pilot program. We had 4 that started, but only 2 actually completed the entire program. The other 2 were a married couple in their 40s who decided to move out of the county and were not able to participate. So the first participant was a young man at the age of 40. He was selected because he was moving out of his family home and into a community apartment. And so this was a very successful story because he lived in a rural town. He had a lot of isolation, but yet he had a lot of friends because he had belonged to a day program. He did have some kind of employment. So upon doing his application, it was learned that he needed some assistance in navigating certain things in his daily life, for which all of this comes into play. And then the participant number 2, also a young man at the age of 23, a different scenario, was moving out of his family home, but into a dorm, into a college. And as you can imagine, first time leaving home and the anxieties around himself and his parents. This too was a good opportunity for all of us to learn how to get by these barriers.
So to kick off our project, we thought it was really important to host an orientation for our participants and their families and the staff that would be working with them. We really wanted to use orientation as an opportunity to establish clear goals for the program, making sure that everyone who was involved in some capacity with this really understood that this was going to be really person-centered and that we were going to be working on some skill development in our efforts to build capacity with our individuals. In the orientation, we actually decided to share some information for everybody, and then we kind of broke into groups where the participant and the staff person that would be working with them went off in one group, and parents and family members or caregivers went in another group. And this was a way to make sure we were addressing any concerns that parents and family members might have had around health and safety in the community and the types of activities that we were going to be doing, giving them an opportunity to ask questions about supervision and things of that nature so that they felt really comfortable and really were fully buying into this program that we were offering. And then similarly with the individual and their staff person, we were able to also share kind of what the goals were. We wanted to get their buy-in as well. And we thought it was really key that the staff really understood what the goals were and really understood what our objectives were. We didn't want staff to take on the role of another parent, so to speak, and be doing for our individuals. We really wanted staff to be role models and mentors and really acting as a bridge, helping this individual learn how to connect with community members, helping this individual identify some of those gatekeepers in the community. And so that orientation program really set the stage for the work that we would be doing going forward. The other part that was important as part of the orientation was making sure that everybody involved understood that this was a short-term program, that we were going to be working over the course of a couple of months with our individuals, but that this wasn't going to be a long-term program or a program that included long-term follow-along supports. We wanted to make sure, again, that folks understood what they were signing up for and what they were going to receive, and that this wasn't supposed to be a replacement for other kinds of activities or programs that folks were involved with already. The other piece that we did as we started our project was completing surveys, pre and post tests with our participants. These surveys were a way of really gauging what kind of community involvement our individuals were already experiencing, what some of the barriers to that involvement might have been, some of the challenges that they had around accessing the community. And it was a way for us to gauge their self-efficacy, their perceived capacity to be in the community, their perceived capacity to be somebody with social capital. And by doing the test, both at the beginning and the end of our project, we were really able to measure what changed. Did people feel more empowered at the end? Did folks have more opportunities for engagement in the community? And that really gave us some good feedback to be able to apply to future or existing programs.
So in terms of what we found, for participant 1 who moved from the rural area to the more city apartment, like Nancy explained, he had a staff person who worked with him over weeks to kind of navigate the city. Because again, he lived in an area where literally the closest neighbor was probably 20 miles away, no stores, no nothing. So this is a big change for him to live pretty close to a main street in walking distance of movie theaters, gas stations, libraries. So the worker kind of helped show him how to navigate the town, but also how to make meaningful connections. So like if he went to the library, you know, he would know the librarian, he would be able to identify staff there that could help him, where he didn't rely on the staff who was actually teaching him how to get there. So that was really important. When we did the surveys, what we found was his first survey indicated he felt really safe at his family's home, but very isolated and lonely. This is someone who often said, I'm lonely, I want friends, I want to be able to see people. He had a girlfriend, he rarely got to see her because of the distance. And by moving, he got more access to his friends and his loved ones in that manner. Something that was kind of surprising though, is when we did the second survey at the end, he felt a lot more connected, but his sense of safety and security did go down because he was moving in an area where he now heard sirens and he would see police, and you know, he had to learn about like what would happen if you're walking late at night and somebody approaches you. How do you respond to that? So while he felt more connected, there was other work that had to be done to ensure he felt safe. But ultimately, his family did ask him if he wanted to move back home, and he advocated very strongly to stay in his apartment because of how much more connected he felt. And eventually, he did get a roommate. He's really good friends with his roommate, and he's really thriving in that setting, because it's now been a couple years since we actually did this original project. So it's really great to see how much he's flourished in his community setting, and he's really stuck by it. So that's really nice to see long term. For our second participant, he went from his home to moving onto a college campus and living in a dorm. And of course, there's always the concerns of, you know, what if a roommate and taking advantage, and he's a little bit older, so of course he could buy alcohol. We don't want people taking advantage of that. And in order to kind of help him find success, we found another student who was going to the same school who was willing to kind of step into this role. And our community partner of Autism Connections kind of helped facilitate that. So that's where it was a cool collaboration. It was a lot of us, you know, making these pieces fit together. It wasn't just one organization making it happen. It was everyone as a team. So that peer on the campus, she really helped him kind of navigate, learn where all the spots were, build up routines on where to eat, establishing people he could eat with so he's not eating alone in his dorm, and also getting connected to different groups. So he did end up joining I want to say like a music club and an art club and like clubs of his interest. And that peer helped him to initially discover those and find those, but she didn't go to those groups with him. He went on his own and he met his own friends and established his own relationships. And that was the big thing. And that was our message at the beginning, that this was something where they could build long-lasting, meaningful relationships on their own that didn't rely on staff being their friend and bringing them places. That's what we did not want to do. So when he filled out his surveys, when he was at home, he noted he felt connected and he felt safe and secure. But his second survey, you saw those numbers increase. It wasn't as dramatic as the first person, but it was pretty significant. It was interesting when we talked to the parents. The parents felt like he had a false sense of connection when he lived at home, and that when he went to college, it was more of a real connection. They felt like he would consider staff as friends when he lived at home, whereas living on college, he actually had real friends he could name off. So their responses to this were pretty significant, because as parents, they saw a big change and they were really scared. They were really nervous whether this should work. They were even contemplating driving him back and forth to the campus so he could live at home. But with this, they took the leap, and I think it paid off. Unfortunately, obviously, COVID has impacted schools, and he was one of the ones impacted by this, but I think he really did get a really good jump start into his college career through the support of this pilot program. When we look at unexpected victories of what came out of this, I think we all thought we would have an idea, but we didn't realize how big it would be. I think our biggest victory was opening up an evening program. So what our agency did was we reached out to a local recreational center, and we asked if they would be willing to collaborate with us, and they said absolutely. And we were able to secure a room on their site and open an evening program for 18 to 22-year-olds who have aged out of like traditional after school care, but are too young to kind of enter the adult world, and parents are still working. So this program's offered free of cost for select individuals, Monday through Friday from 3 to 6, and it's very community-based. We take them to the library, we participate in community activities, and there's a lot of social inclusion with other programs going on at that recreational center. So that was a really nice community connection program that really took the foundation of this group and turned it into like a long-lasting program. The other thing we did, typically in a year, we offer a spring break and a summer break camp for 1 week, free of cost, to an average of 30 families. And we found that was a very secluded, isolated. It was our individuals going to a certain site, not really mingling, not really in the community. And we're like, how can we make this better? So using what we learned, we started partnering with other camps and kind of did some natural integration supports. Again, getting them more out into the community, being a part of their community, actively involved in stuff, and inviting other individuals to participate who might not necessarily have disabilities that wouldn't normally be a part of this camp. But, you know, we see the importance of that social capital. And what was nice is those families kind of made friendships, and then they started forming play groups and hangout groups, and those friendships carried on after the camp. And that was really nice. We kind of fostered the connection, and then the families rolled with it. So overall, we're really using the community-based approach in all existing work. So, and it's actually helping us make the dollar go farther, because we've had other organizations and agencies offer to provide a staff free of cost because they're collaborating. So, so we save on staffing. They've offered us spaces where we don't have to pay rent per se, because they see it as a good connection and a good partnership. And we've had people donate time, and it comes around, and you see the individuals making friendships and meaningful, like when you talk to them and you say, who are important people in your lives? You know, they name off that librarian that they're on a first name basis. And it's not a staff that's paid to hang out with them. It's somebody that they genuinely like talking to on Thursdays when they go to the library to exchange their books and stuff. And that has a lot of meaning. And I think the parents see a lot of value that their loved ones are actively a part of their community. And that's really what we're trying to foster, is that those community engagements are real. It's not just staff bringing people to watch something or observe something, it's them actually being a part of something. So that's what our big takeaways were. And overall, it was just a really, really great opportunity.
Great. Sonia and your team, thanks so much for that overview. We're going to hold on questions. Well, if you have questions, you can stick them in the chat room or in the Q&A room. What we're going to do now is just a short little break before we then go into the interactive panel. We're going to ask each of the teams that gave us the overview of their program. Ingrid and I are going to ask them some questions. You can also join in by asking questions into the chat room. So let's do this. How about a quick 5-minute break? We can leave everything up and rolling just as it is. You don't have to sign out or sign back in. Let's just wait. We'll get back together at 20 after 3, and then we'll roll in for the last 40 minutes into questions, and then some summaries, and maybe some lessons learned, some takeaways that you might take back from this session. So if we can, just a quick 5-minute break. We'll get started right at 20 after. Thanks. We can get back. We have limited time, and you know, we really wanted to get into some questions regarding each of our 3 programs, as each of our 3 projects. And as you heard from each of the projects, you see they all sort of started in a different spot with this, and which is great, which is actually what we wanted, because building community, there's no algorithm for it. There's no, you know, one set way. In a macro sort of paradigm, you know, you do what is going to be best with how your community is set up, how you want to pick up and go. For example, the Holyoke group, they started with resources. They talked about their library and the community center that they already had lined up. The Pathlights group, they actually started with some folks that they had identified. And then in the Berkshire group, it was sort of an amalgamation between some of the folks they already knew, some of the resources they had. So they aligned following that. And again, that's, I think, a really important start point in understanding community building, is you start with where your community is at and as best as you can. What we want to do now is we want to turn into some questions that both Ingrid and I had pulled together to kind of get started with drilling down a little bit deeper within each of the programs. And some of the questions will be open-ended that can apply to all 3 groups. Some might be much more specific to a particular project and how it started. And maybe I can get started, and we could start with Karen, and wanted to really see what were the key lessons that you learned in this project that you were actually able to assimilate into your other activities. Were there any lessons? And if there were, what were they that you were able to assimilate in?
So I would say the biggest lessons for us were being flexible, being persistent, and not giving up. Taking every roadblock and making it an opportunity, and just continuing to build off of what we've already built off. And I think that we use that in our day-to-day work all the time, not necessarily just with helping people access the community and opportunities in the community, but when we're helping families with navigating through different parts of
Great.
life.
And I think also really important, like the mindset of thinking of, how could we really help people access the community, and making sure, that us as part of, MCS and DDS, that we put ourselves out there in the community and make those connections. Because I think the biggest lesson from us in so many ways was by connecting with different community agencies, it led to some unexpected connections, and, ended up meeting a college baseball coach and having someone become the team manager. And so those things naturally happen by going to luncheons at a local college, and, being part of that community and figuring out, who on the staff is already part of different community groups and has connections. And, I think moving forward, unfortunately, in terms of putting things into place, COVID kind of came right at the end of our project. So everything changed this year, obviously, for all of us. But moving forward, I think, realizing how much community connections can just lead to unexpected opportunities for the people we support.
Jason, that's you're absolutely correct in terms of that sort of that utilization of things that are there and kind of putting them into place. And of course, COVID was really and the pandemic kind of put the kibosh on a lot of the forward motion that each of the groups sustained. I wanted to flip into a second question, if I can, and then Ingrid will have a question. I wanted to present this question to Rhonda. When Pathlights kind of did their overview, they started with 3 people, and of course, there were some changes that happened there, and people dropping out and other kinds of things that we know might occur. But I wanted to ask Rhonda, one of the key things that I know we talked about in training and wondered if you could say a word or two about was mapping the community. How did you find maybe some community resources that matched up with the persons that you had identified and had begun to engage in conversation? They told you something they liked. What was the strategy you used to sort of map and find the resources in your community that might match?
Well, and of course, I would like anyone else in my team, if you would like to pop in, please do. But honestly, we started extremely low tech. We kind of sat down as a group and said, what's out there? I mean, like it was very much an upside down pyramid. We started very small and then, got a lot bigger. So we did that. We talked about groups, and, we looked, first we talked about, I believe, correct me if I'm wrong, geographically. So, we were meeting at Family Empowerment, which is over in Hadley. So we said, okay, let's kind of make a little circle around where we are and around where these participants live. And let's think about what is out there, what is available in the community. Because before I said, if someone wants to roller skate, that's great, but we don't want to advertise roller skating if there's not a rink anywhere. So it was really thinking about what was out in the community, what could we propose and introduce to people. But like you said, that was kind of during that first step when people identified. So we were like thinking, what can we provide for experiences for these specific people? And honestly, everything kind of just flipped and changed after we decided to hold the event and make it more of like a recruitment.
Mm-hmm.
But then when it was that, honestly, it was all about surveying and interviews and just getting a feel for what people were interested in. And based on that, we then went out into the community and found.
Great. Rhonda's overview there is really an important one because, this community engagement is really about what is out in your community, and the community mapping process becomes a really fundamentally important stepstone there in terms of analyzing, uncovering, exploring what might be out there that would match up. So great points, Rhonda. Thank you. Ingrid, let me flip over to you if there's any questions that you might have or to pose to Stephen's team and to the Berkshire group to react to.
Yeah, so, I mean, we just talked a little bit about community mapping, but and identifying interests and gatekeepers. We heard a little bit from MCS about what do you do when you're the person you've identified to be a bridge, and suddenly changes jobs and whatnot. But I guess I'm going to put it broadly out there that, after learning these key strategies, and we have an audience of other area offices and family support providers, what advice would you guys have for other agencies who are interested in implementing some of these strategies based on your learning? Who would like to pick that up first?
Start with Sonia. Sonia, can you respond to that?
Yeah, I've been shooting stuff in the chat to answer those. I think the biggest thing is to not psych yourself out. I think it's really easy to identify all the barriers, but instead start with just kind of picking up the phone and just calling. We were really surprised, because when we sat down and we were talking about, even an integrated summer camp, and when the idea of some other agency just volunteering a staff to work our camp, I was like, who's going to do that? Who's going to pay to have their person come work for free for essentially for us with no incentive? And we've been actually surprised at how many places when you call them and present an idea for a collaboration that they jump on it and they're really open to it and they're willing to make, concessions and stuff. And we've actually had other people approach us for more of those kinds of opportunities once we open the door for it. So just don't psych yourself out and assume that things are just not going to work out. Just pick up the phone and say, hey, I have a weird idea. Are you open to it? And if this exactly doesn't work, what would work for you? And I think, again, you would be surprised at how many people are open to that.
Yeah, yeah. Let me.
I have a memory of us discussing, how sometimes some of the learning that happened here was, gosh, sometimes we need to use our own social capital in order to create social capital opportunities for the people that we're trying to support. And that was a bit of an aha moment for us.
Yeah.
I think when we were reaching out also, to the Y in the library, we were having conversations about when we reach out, what do we have to offer for them, and not just make it that relationship of, we're trying to have, can you help us include some of the people we support, but, making that a relationship that's beneficial in both directions, and, making sure that we're highlighting the benefits of, we were looking at volunteer opportunities for people we support and, how they can help an organization. I think, that was definitely a really important thing to think about moving forward. And then also a recommendation for sure, I think what we ran into was the challenges of taking on this project on top of everything else we had. And we kept talking about, as an agency, if it's possible, and I understand resources become challenging at times, but to dedicate a person to that job. And because making community connections and all this work, it's time consuming. And I think that took us by surprise how time consuming it was. And to have someone whose, focus is and whose expertise is that area within an agency, I think could be really helpful.
Mm-hmm. Excellent examples and responses. Let me just sort of toss this out to any of the three projects, and it really comes from the question and answer box. Marshall had proposed that he wanted to get families involved in a local church, and they had a child with a disability, but wasn't sure exactly what protocols or outreach might be available to help educate the church in best ways to assimilate the child into the activity. What's your thoughts about that kind of an issue? You find a community, you find a family, they're interested in a particular they want to get involved in the church. They have a child with disability, but the church is nervous because they've never really dealt with disabilities. What kinds of ways might we help that church be more inclusive? And I know that's really generic, but how would you address something like that? And let
So
me just open it up. Sonia, you want to take a shot?
yeah, I actually did some work on this, and what I did was vacation Bible schools are really big in my area. So I kind of reached out and was like, hey, I know you have a vacation Bible school coming up. Like, would you mind if maybe I sent a staff with a kiddo who's really interested in attending? And then, so they attended for the week-long vacation Bible school with the staff. And I think the church members who were putting it on kind of saw how it worked, and they were able to keep it going at the Sunday school sessions without the staff needing to be there, because they got that week to kind of see how to make it work and what they needed to have in place to make that work. And then with the Bible school groups, they have different ages, so they just kind of put him in the group that worked with his age range. So that was another really cool, like, we got them off the ground, but then they carried the work forward. So again, sometimes it's just picking up the phone and say, hey, I have an idea. Would you be open to this?
Yeah, exactly. Sometimes community resources are nervous about assimilating an individual or a family because we've always had this dichotomy, right? People with disabilities have been in their own world. And so now here's this generic world, and we're reaching out to create bridges to say, can you assimilate this individual or this family? And, the community resource is getting nervous. What can we do to soften that landing a bit? Any other thoughts?
So
This is Donna, and I have some thoughts about our conversation with that family. The church, a lot of times, other organizations, not just churches, they have fears, and I think that we need to find out what their fears are before we can address them, before we can kind of help them see that some of their fears may be reduced by putting some strategies in place.
Yeah. Okay.
And also getting to know people reduces those fears, and I think, how can we find ways for someone to, once they make that connection, that, they see that this is a person that I could connect with in certain ways. But yeah, I agree, Don. I think that's one of the biggest initial factors in these connections is the fear of community agencies.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And also, I think for our group, we talked a lot about, what we would do going forward if we did have a dedicated person to work on these kind of things. And for us, one of the next steps with identifying people in the community or places would have been, we talked about training gatekeepers, kind of finding the person at this place in the community who's the most open to learning, to understanding. But then we also had to recognize that meant us putting that time, that effort, that, into those types of trainings.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
The other thing that I think can be beneficial kind of across the board is thinking about and presenting these opportunities to community partners from a real strength-based perspective, in that we're not talking about what our individuals cannot do or the ways that they might be disruptive to a group or those kinds of things, but we're highlighting what can this person or their family really be bringing to your group or to your organization? What are the real positives in this person's personality, or what are some real skills that they have that would mesh well with other group members? So that, again, we're reducing that fear of this kind of unknown of what is disability and focusing on this negative, but really focusing on their strengths. And I think that reminder of focusing on strengths is good, not just for our community members, but for the staff working on the projects as well. There was a question in the chat about like, who would be a good person, a good individual for this kind of program? And my answer, and I hope all of our answers, is everyone, all of our individuals that we work with. We may not be totally fading staff support like we talked about in our project with every individual, but there's every individual has the capacity to be a community member. And so if we're focused on strengths, it makes it easier for us to find ways of integrating them. And I think it makes it easier for community partners to think about how they can integrate folks as well.
Mhm. Excellent points, Jess. Any other, these are lessons learned and recommendations, I think, that that you're making generally. Obviously, the three groups here have really they cut their eye teeth on this. They learned, some things didn't go exactly the way they wanted to. They had to scramble. But I think that scrappiness is really part of the secret of success. So what other lessons or what other recommendations would you make with our peers that are on this call that haven't gotten into the community yet all that much? What other recommendations might you make to them about proceeding in that direction? Thoughts?
I just had a thought on that. A lot of towns also have a disability or an inclusion board in their town. I know mine does. So that might be another place where community organizations such as churches and recreation activities and so forth can get some information on how they would be able to help make people feel more welcome into their existing communities.
Yeah. I just to add to this, we did a project, my organization in Pittsburgh. This was a number of years ago, where we were really reaching out to community resources that we had mapped and identified to really soften them a bit and get them to be more more willing to engage. And after we got over the fear factor, we discovered that a number of community resources, rec centers and other places like that, the heart was willing, but the body was weak. The mind was willing, but the body was weak, in that they just were paralyzed by what they could do to incorporate someone, and they were fearful that they might get somebody referred to them and that person might get hurt, or that person, their insurance, all these kinds of roadblocks put some fear into them. And it caused us to, as an organization, to really think, how do we address that? And so one of the things that we did, and we were able to actually get a small grant to help with this, was we created a little manual that was designed at community rec centers, and how they might be more inclusive, what they might do, how they might be more hospitable and welcoming, how they could incorporate a kid into the rec program that might have a disability. And that really went over, a little information can go a long way. Because I think a lot of community resources want to be available to everybody in the community. They just don't know how. They're fearful. And so maybe thinking about how we might play a role in, I don't want to call this educating the community, because it's not. This is actually softening the community. It's encouraging the community to welcome in perhaps kids or families that traditionally haven't been, in their centers. The group up in Toronto that I've been in touch with, that are doing some really interesting things, where they've created a team this is a disability agency. They've created a team, and that's their job, is to go out and basically soften the community, maybe just help with a little bit of information exchange, and encourage them that it's not as hard as they might think it is to incorporate a child or a family that happens to experience a disability. So any thoughts on that piece of the puzzle? I know each of you have weighed in somewhat on how you've done that. With the baseball team, getting the coach who was really willing, and then had the person identified, and they were with the team, and they went to practices and did things. Did you have to do anything to help that along?
Really, no, because the coach was so amazing.
Yeah.
He was just amazing. He was so willing and so open, and the gentleman that was a part of the team manager was part of it, was pretty easygoing.
Yeah.
Was just really wanted to be there, wanted to be part of it, was just kind of blended in. And the coach set the tone for the whole team. So the team really embraced his presence there. The other nice part about that is that because this participant didn't drive, his stepfather brought him. So he kind of helped out a little bit too. And it was just an added security for the participant to have. So we weren't there. It would have looked really weird, I think, if I showed up at the baseball team with him. But his stepdad was he's young and kind of, knew a lot about baseball and knew what to talk about, and kind of friendly with the coach. And so we did go check on him a few times, but he wasn't somebody that needed a ton of support, but some check-ins.
It's a wonderful, wonderful example of, because what we're really talking about is a diffusion challenge. How does somebody new get diffused into something that exists already? And so, there's fears on both sides of that challenge, but the notion of softening the social infrastructure, that sounds like a big word, but softening the landing point when you identify a community resource and you're guiding the family across the bridge to that resource, how might that resource be softened? In the case of the baseball team, you had a coach who was a natural gatekeeper. He was someone already, just willing, warm, welcoming kind of a person. And I think a lot of people would be like that if they just had the permission to do that. And if they really, any fears that they might have might get alleviated. So there's, this kind of work, there's always a lesson to be learned. And there's always something new to discover. Let me just quickly throw out a resource. It's a book, and the book is called Palaces for the People. It's a book by Eric Kleinenberg, who's a sociologist, who talks about community resources that might, and the infrastructure of those resources, how they might be softened so newcomers can begin to build social capital. It's really a very enlightening book. A book is relatively new. It came out in 2019. Kleinenberg, very thoughtful. It's not a disability book. It's really about how can a newcomer entering into a community that they don't belong to at this point, how can they be welcomed there, and what might happen in that process in terms of the social infrastructure of that community center, that library, that baseball team, whatever that target might be. Other thoughts, Ingrid? What do we think? Other questions?
So I'm seeing some questions in the chat that have to do, a little bit with what resources, and time commitments were required to do this initial investment and do this project. And on the flip side of that, I would love to hear from you all of what have we learned about what's required to sustain it, because that was one of our initial goals in all of this, was to be able to really make that cultural mindset shift. So who would like to speak about kind of that initial investments and of time and resources, and then what do you think is needed in order to sustain it?
I think from my perspective, it was, quite a bit of time and resources. And a lot of us didn't have a lot of that to give. So we were trying to kind of fit this in where we could, which is why I think a lot of us sort of agreed that there needs to be somebody kind of dedicated to this work, because it's a lot of outreach work. It's a lot of using your own social capital, has been mentioned before. And, each community that you are doing this with, so each individual who lives in a different town or city would require community mapping of that particular space, that geographic space. So that is time consuming. Some of that can be done, and kind of put, in a place where, other people could access it, but actually getting people connected to different places is rather time consuming. And the other thing that I would like to make a point on is that it's ongoing. You don't know where you're going to fall in the process. A lot of our project kind of stalled because what we found is that people thought they were ready, and then something in life occurred and they had to pause, and you don't know how long that pause is going to be. So you have to pick it back up where that person exists. So I guess several different points there. It needs to be person-centered. It needs to be centered on the person, where they're at that particular time, and honor where they're at, and move forward at a pace that makes sense for them. But it requires a fair chunk of time.
Jason, some thoughts on, you have your hand up?
I don't think so, but I will chime in on, I think, it is a big time commitment. I think that's something that we learned, and we kept going back to, wow, it would be great if we could have a dedicated person hired to focus on this. But, I wanted to mention too, one of the surprises, or one of the unexpected things for us that I don't think we've talked about yet, is as we did some community mapping, as we visited the library and saw some of the other groups that were happening, we actually realized there was already more inclusion going on in these community places than we were aware of. We discovered some of the people that we support were already participating in some groups that we went to check out. So as much as there's, that fear from some people out there and challenge getting people included, on the other end of that spectrum, there were also really nice opportunities that were happening naturally without our support. And it was really pleasant to see, and to know that, people in a lot of these community locations were more open than we had expected when we first reached out.
Yeah, that's great. Were there any reactionary people who that you encountered in any of the experiences that really didn't think it was appropriate, or didn't think it was the best thing to do in terms of having someone with a disability included into their world? Anybody encounter any of that?
So we didn't have the community have that reaction. We had one family have that. They were very against participant one moving on his own. They didn't think he could do it. They thought it would be a disaster. And participant one was his own guardian. And it was a little bit of a contention thing. There was a kind of a power struggle with the family. The family didn't support that transition. And then they were really shocked when he was thriving, and they almost were kind of like, hey, why don't you come home? It'll be better if you come home. And there was like a little bit, but he stood his ground and he said, no, this is better. And, and he's really happy about that. So that was a little bit tough, but we did overcome it. I did just want to back off what Jason was saying. For those of you who might know me from the family support world, I'm always a champion of charting a life course. If you use the tools, there's an entire community domain, and if you use the integrated star, that is a great way to find out what families are already connected to that you can expand on. So you don't have to do all that work of reinventing the wheel, because you might be surprised at how much they're already doing this naturally and not even thinking about it. And that's usually where I start, because I think so many times we just jump to applications, eligibility, and all of that stuff when there's so many great things that people can access free of cost in their community. And we're a huge promoter of all the community events going on out here in the Berkshires. There's lots of different fun events on different days of the week and stuff. So we put that out to families like, hey, why don't you try going to this? Why don't you do this? You know, and it takes the burden off of us of having to like make it happen, and they find ways to make it happen. And like I said, we sometimes just foster the initial connection, and then we plant the seed for the families to grow and stuff. So while yes, depending on what kind of supports you're organizing, it can be a lot of work, but there's a lot of things that you can empower families to kind of take ownership of. And that's the message we try to send, rather than create a position that this is what they do. We just kind of sprinkle it out through all the stuff we're existing doing, because let's be real, funding is far and few between, so you have to make that dollar go far. So we just kind of tried to reset the culture mindset of how we look at this, and we integrate it with charting a life course, and it marinates really well for us.
I want to just add a little bit to that question about time and resources too, and acknowledge how much time really all of these teams put into making this happen. It was a huge lift, and it was not a funded from DDS lift, and it involved a lot of extra work. And I think it was definitely beneficial, but I want to just thank all of our community organizations for everything that they did, and our agencies in making this happen. The one thing I want to add is that, you know, we know that resources are few and far between. It's rare that we get like this extra bucket of funding where we can create a brand new position, or maybe we do, but it's only good for a year, and so we're not sure about sustainability. One of the things that I think we can do with this project is, just like we're sharing this information with other family support centers and agencies today, is that within individual agencies, there's an opportunity for the different departments of an agency to learn from their family support center's experience. So I know many of our agencies are really big and they do lots of different things, and I'm not sure that those departments are always sharing best practices. So I guess I'm encouraging all of you to make a point to do that. And I think that, speaking just from the Berkshires team, I know that Sonia and her folks in the Family Support Center have a lot of information that they could share with, say, BARC's employment services, this community-based day program they're doing, that this information could be shared with other folks that are doing participant-directed programming, self-directed DDS supports, agency with choice supports. Even our residential programs could benefit from a little bit of a mind shift around integration. And so, no, there's not necessarily like new funding to support a brand new position to do this, but I think agencies can share information, and they can adapt their culture of how we're approaching integration across settings and across service models.
Okay. Yeah, great points all. Ingrid, we're just about 4 minutes out. 4 minutes to close. We know folks have other things they've got to do.
Yeah.
So, you know, just kind of any summary points that we can make before we close out.
So I'm seeing that Nikki's had her hand up. I want to give her, no? Okay, all right. So Jess, I think summed it up fairly well. Like, you know, what DDS brought to this project was a lot of technical support, and I think that there was a lot of learning that took place. I agree that it would be, I mean, I would love to have a community connector position in each of our family support programs to be, you know, dedicating themselves full time. But a lot of the learning that took place here, I think there are lots of ways that we can integrate this work into the work that we're already doing. I think Sonia's idea of, you know, that Charting a Life course offers a really good lens through which to look at this, and help us map out both, you know, what's in our community and what individual individuals and families have in their lives. And pulling that together, I hope that, that we will be continuing this good work together. I also do want to let you know, we have put together a summary report that has, more details than what we've provided here. And that will be made for distribution, and we'll be sending it to everyone who attended this webinar. And we can also send out the PowerPoint slides, because we've had a lot of requests for that in the chat. So, I'm really grateful to everyone who did dedicate so much time and thought to this project. And I hope that it provides some inspiration for other providers, in family support and beyond, for how we can do this work better.
Let me echo Ingrid's points, and especially to applaud the three teams, the three agencies that really stepped up to the plate. Had to put some things on the side in order to take on this project, and then of course the pandemic, which kind of came in and sort of disrupted everything for all of us. But nonetheless, I think there were some really incredible lessons learned. The teams that worked on these three projects, just incredibly passionate, intelligent, and hardworking folks. So anyone on the call, feel free to contact any of the three teams or any of the players on the three teams as a follow-up if you want further advice or counsel. Doing community work is messy. It's not easy. There's setbacks. You heard some of the lessons here from the teams that you got to be flexible. You got to be scrappy. You can't take things personally. You just have to keep moving forward. So I really want to salute everyone. I want to thank all the folks that plugged into to this webinar, but mostly want to thank the teams that worked on it, and Ingrid for her leadership, Doug McCallum for his leadership in launching this effort. Let's go and let's try to continue to do what we can to build a community where everybody belongs. Ingrid, any last minutes?
Thank you, Al, and thanks to everybody.
Thanks a lot, folks. Have a great rest of the evening.
All right.
Thank you so much.